Before this episode, I would like to thank our sponsor, Scale Model Challenge. Since 2007, Scale Model Challenge has grown and grown, becoming the most unmissable show in the modelling calendar, with 2 days of workshops, a world-class contest, over 150 unique and specialised traders, model clubs, and probably the best social scene at any model show in the world, attracting modellers from every continent except Antarctica. This year, the 15th show for SMC, the celebrations are set to be even better, with an extension adding a Friday workshop programme and some of the biggest names in the hobby showing you how they do what they do and helping attendees to do it too. But it's not just a show for names. As big as it is and as superb as the models are, this is a show for everyone, regardless of skill and experience, where you will find a warm welcome no matter who you are or where you're from. So check out scalemodelchallenge.com or look up SMC on the socials to book your place at Scale Model Challenge this October. If you love this hobby, you can't afford to miss it. I would also like to personally thank the Model Philosopher patrons: Warren, Eddie, Robert, Stephen, Christian, Carlos, Paul, Shafe, Flip and John. You guys help make this show possible and I hugely appreciate your support. Welcome to the Model Philosopher, episode 4. This week my guest is Ivan Cocker. Ivan has a highly informed view on history as keeper of models at the Malta Maritime Museum for Heritage Malta, and as a world-renowned modeller in his own right, with a long list of award-winning models and some seminal pieces that were a big influence on me as a returner to the hobby on the pages of Military Modelling magazine and at Euromilitaire. He's also a reenactor of several periods, including medieval and Napoleonic, and head ordnance judge at Scale Model Challenge. We talked about the relationship between history and modelling, historical accuracy, historiography and much more. Ivan, welcome to the Model Philosopher. A lot of people will, I should hope, recognise you from your contribution to modelling over many years, especially in dioramas and armour. I remember particularly covers of and articles in military modelling and all over the place. But you're also a committed historian. You work in history and museums, and you're a reenactor as well. Can you tell us about your connection with history?
Thank you so much, Chris, for the invitation. I'm humbled with such an intro. History is a passion for me. So could be from where I come, because Malta is practically every stone is a historical artifact.
The island's saturated in history, isn't it?
Yes. So sometimes it's too much. It's too much. And after a period, I ended up as well working into history as well. So I work in a museum. So in a way, I'm now connected. And yes, I'm also a reenactor. And reenactment taught me a lot. Honestly, I entered reenactment to cut out from modeling in a way. So to make it more fun or a little bit more relaxed, but it ended up different because it taught me a lot. It's something totally different. When you wear the things and you try to mimic what others went through and the past, you start to understand more.
Well, they call it living history, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. Right. It is playing soldiers, that's the truth. But when you start living the past, you start understanding more. even what a soldier felt. Sometimes we used to do long hours marching, for example. You understand the fatigue, you understand even taking care of weapons and the weight of things. For example, I used to do Napoleonic and medieval. So both two things are different, two different academics in a way. And totally start understanding even when you see model figures, what's good or wrong in a way,
Yeah, yeah.
even how they wear things.
But also, it's your job, right?
Yes, yes. I'm a keeper of models. It's a very interesting job. In a way, I take care of the model collection, the national model collection, and it's quite a selective thing. So we have models from 17th and 18th century. So part of my job is to study those models and conserve them and take care of their conservation. And obviously, when the curatorial team we come up with new ideas, and especially for displays and heritage interpretation or new sources, new models and dioramas come in play. So we use a lot models and dioramas to disseminate what we practically get new information and try to reach out people with our sources. So sometimes it's not only you write papers or you write books. Dioramas and models are still quite an effective tool in museums.
Why do you think they're still effective in this age of kind of VR and interactive displays and so on?
VR and AR is quite good in a way. It's something very innovative. But what's different is at the moment, technology as it is, VR and AR allows you at least 15 minutes to view. So, or else your mind will be too much. And what is different is you're seeing a video or you're rendering a virtual world. A model is a tactical thing. You're seeing a 3D object in front of you. There's more connection. And what I found, models can help out. Mind you, I don't see one better than the other because there are some dedicated things. People say models and dioramas are dying out from museums, for example. I don't really agree with that. I think the good thing of a diorama or a model in a museum, for example, on a showcase, you're allowed to stay there, watch it, and as long as you want, check out what details you want. They can communicate to a young person and to an old person, and that there's no difference in a way. So I think there needs to be a balance in between. No one is killing the other. I don't think so.
Do you think there's a perspective that models can bring as well with a big diorama that you don't just get the sort of the experience at a close level of one person on, say, a battlefield or in an area, but also the topography, the foliage, villages, towns, other people, everything else.
When you're doing historical dioramas for a museum, it's totally a different concept than you're not that free like we're doing model making for home. You have documentation, you have to abide to that, but you find gaps. You find gaps, and so you first thing what I go through is you collect sources. You start to see ideal you get, let's say if it's a battlefield or a particular battle, you try to get sources from both sides. Sometimes it's difficult, but it's ideal to get from both sides because historians are biased. So sometimes you get sources that are totally keeping what they wanted to tell us in a way. So you try to combine that. You also consult archaeological finds when you get so because through archaeology today and especially with new technology, you can get even the weather, the terrain, anything. It's the sky is the limit today, or what you can get with all these things. So, but still, when you collect all these things, my job is to create a storyline. From there, you get a storyboard, like a movie in a way. And yes, artistic license still is important factor, because you, although everything is historical, you still have to balance things to, especially to give the proper story in a way.
You're used to a concept of history that's more based in a sort of an academic idea of history, where you see things a lot more in context. Do you think modelers are maybe too specialized in their knowledge of history or their concept of history, say based around a single vehicle or single army?
I still think history can play a good part. So unfortunately, sometimes I notice that a good amount of modelers, or because of time, or because they lack to find things, don't consult historical sources. And nowadays, I don't think everything is you can pretty find, or you can talk to people, and over social media you can connect with historians today, with experts. So sometimes I'm a little biased on this. Honestly, I'm a little biased. So I feel that some needs to put a little bit of more effort. But it again depends what the taste and what the modelers would like to find. On the other hand, maybe there are modelers who don't like to read, or don't like to search, but I still find that mothers needs to keep their eyes open, even look at pictures and original photos, for example. You can notice many things. You can really go through, scrutinize and explore a photo, and basically you learn as well. You really learn out of that.
I think it's not everyone's aim to be historically accurate or to tell history. Some people just want to build a model. But there are people who say that they build models to honour history. And I think if you're saying you honour history, I don't actually know what that means. But if you're saying that if you're saying that you're doing something to teach history, as a lot of modelers use as a kind of a fig leaf for why they build the things they build, because, people will learn history from it. Do you think, I don't know, I kind of feel like they don't actually put much history in it. They're just like, well, there was a tank that looked like that, so that's history, if you see what I mean.
It's quite a strong thing. Let's say honoring history, sometimes it depends. I think it depends from a modeler point of view. It really depends. What's the aim of what he's trying to fulfill? What I feel that's something, my opinion in a way. A modeler needs to really go through that he's connecting to a viewer. So in a way, I don't like to say it. It is an art. It is a visual art. What I say. Or say, let's say visual communication, because this is another can of worms that can go out of hand. So it
Well,
is
it's definitely a craft, at least. Maybe an art, but
exactly.
definitely a craft. Yeah.
And you know where I stand on this.
Yeah.
I'm quite artistic in a way.
Yeah.
So it is a visual communication tool. So, and I think in that aspect, but it's always depends what one needs to do. For example, myself, once I came up with this idea, I found that in 1945, Czechoslovakia and Prague, there was an uprising, for example, and I was intrigued with the story, and I came up with this diorama, and I found this. It was quite a camp that was uh, originally liberated by the Soviets. But my idea, what I came up with was I created this particular headers that they kept the insurgent captured, and I don't know if you remember it, Chris. I think
Oh,
you
of course I do, yeah.
might you might remember this one. And I created this idea of this header opening up this gate of this particular camp, and the people like rising against the camp, the Nazis that were there.
Mm.
So I remember once I posted this on Facebook, and I was practically being uh, pinpointed by especially people from the east that told me, no, 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 that's not really historical accurate. This is not what happened. Thought, yes, I'm aware about that, but my intention was a little bit different. It was quite a little bit of an artistic thing based on historical thing, but my storyline was rage against the machine in a way. The idea, the people uprise against. At that time, I remember the news was filled with the uprising in North Africa, especially in Libya at that time. So these ideas were quite into my mind, with people rising up against dictators and these things. So, but so this is something you cannot end up with model making. You come up with a different story, different concept. You're not really rewriting history, but you're giving a communication thing, a message in a way, and maybe that's something modelers can really look into it.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and it's quite hard to articulate because it sounds heretical as soon as you say it. But I think sometimes modelers obsess too much about the details of history and not about the spirit of history. So in your case, that diorama represented the spirit of the people rising up to liberate themselves and their countrymen, particularly in the camp. And maybe that actual event didn't happen of the Hetzer going through the gate, but the uprising did, and that emotion and that movement of people in Czechoslovakia wanting to liberate themselves definitely happened. So it's historically truthful, but not historically accurate. You see what I mean?
Exactly.
But I think it's important to get that kind of spirit of history into the things we do, the emotion of it, because the emotion is quite often the thing that's missing in models.
I think so. I sometimes I balance. There are two particular model makers. There are those that go into the technical thing and they enjoy building up the model and put all the details and be very, 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 very accurate. So, and I think for them, if we're speaking about machines, that will be the main factor that they are seeing. And there are others that it can be a little bit also artistic in a way, but try to convey a message or try to come up with some ideas as well, or play out with colors. I don't always see it that you're trying to downgrade history or trying to come up with rewriting history or being, yeah, you can be also, this is another factor. You can give certain messages or be do some propaganda with it or something like that. um, this can happen with books and anything. So as I say, model making is a medium, so it's the opposite side. I think that's something we don't sometimes look. We have to see what other people think when they see our models. We like to say we build models for ourselves. It's true. We build them for ourselves, but we want to show them as well.
If you just do it for yourself, why not just finish it, put it in a box, and put it away somewhere?
Exactly.
If you're showing it, it's because you want people to see it, and then that's the communication.
That's true. That's true. This is quite a conflict for me because in my line of work, sometimes I have to be quite strict in a way because model making in museums is quite a compromise thing. You can be free in a way, but sometimes you have to be quite selective. So I recently in my studies I made a case study of a particular model that was in Imperial War Museum. Sadly, recently I heard they took it off. It was about the Holocaust. It was the Auschwitz camp. It was a 172 model, large, I think about 4-6 meters, something like that. I totally agree.
Well, the camp was huge, wasn't it?
That
So
was huge.
172nd is, yeah.
But what was impressive is we all know it's a sad story, quite horror story in a way. But the model makers came up with a brilliant idea. They and even the designer of that exhibition, they placed a room that was dark, and they created a gray diorama that was almost white, no color, but they created something that was quite impressive in a way. Going back to model making, the hobby model making. If you do something like that in a hobby in competition, for example, it is accepted or not. I feel we need to open up to someone coming up with this idea and be innovative in a way. Sometimes I feel we need to think a little bit out of the box. Although things are historical accurate, for example, let's say this Auschwitz diorama was very historical accurate. I managed to connect with the model maker who made it, and they studied photos of the period to create the proper place and the proper buildings and even the amount of people that they inserted. So it was quite a well-sourced, documented diorama. But on the other hand, they were artistic as well. Even the message, how it is. So they didn't like. I don't say glorify the idea. So they didn't put color. Why they didn't put color? Because it's so poignant.
I think by removing colour, it kind of
I think
subconsciously you think of black and white photos, and black and white
exactly.
photos we associate with real because they're documentary. They're not,
I think so.
we're used to seeing black and white photos of the war. So, in a sense, it made it more realistic on a subconscious level by taking the colour out of it.
I think so. And if you continue on this concept, we can play as well what Spielberg made in Schindler's List as well. So I think sometimes yes, playing with colors is another topic that we can go through.
Yeah, that's a whole episode on
Yes,
its own.
yes. And I did an experiment once.
I remember. Yeah, was it a BT5 or a BT7?
That old Euromilitaire days.
Spanish Civil War diorama, wasn't it?
Exactly. That was quite a shock. I remember to the guys judging it.
Yeah, that caused would be in danger of going off the subject, but I'm going to stick with it anyway. That caused quite a stir when you posted it online as well. I'm missing links, I think. A lot of people reacted quite, I wouldn't say negatively, but they didn't get it.
Yes,
They didn't like it, and they didn't get it.
That's true. Some thought it was black and white from Photoshop in a way.
Yes, yeah.
Others had some negative things about the Spanish War, or I know it is a harsh topic to discuss as well. So
Especially with Spaniards.
that's
Well, that brings us back to history. I mean, the sort of the perception of history in Spain
that's
is a very it's a living thing, if you see what I mean. There's constant
yes,
sort of
that's true.
push, pull, and debate in Spain about the Civil War.
That's true.
And do you think that models sometimes represent the from a historiography point of view, since you're an academic, you know this stuff very well. Do you find that models are often indicative of the attitude of the time towards what they're depicting? So do you think that
Yes,
changes over time?
that is true. That is true. Going back to my work, when I go through especially our national collection and especially see old models, and you have to understand why they were built and who built them and who built them. So, and I think even today that continues subconsciously, even us modelers, sometimes we don't realize we're conditioned to some ideas and concepts that would go through. Could be inspirational. I think it is an academic topic to, to go into this more than that. And it's quite philosophical. I think model making is quite philosophical.
Yeah, well, that's why this podcast exists.
Yeah, I'm pulling this one.
I mean, I think a lot of my generation and the previous, I mean, I'm late Gen X, and I think early Gen X and the baby boomer generation, I think a lot of our models are very heavily influenced by the war films of the 50s, 60s, and 70s rather than history. And I don't think it's necessarily a conscious thing, although people do often obviously try to make models based on movies, but they're consciously making it about the movie model. But I think also subconsciously, our idea, particularly of World War II and World War One, is based on the cultural understandings of World War II and World War One in the West from the 50s, 60s, 70s. And actually, if you look at how history looks at those periods now, it's a little bit different from how we think about it.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And this even I noticed that even going through exhibitions around the world, and you see people of certain age doing they are more inclined to certain topics. Youngsters today are moving out. They are moving out. It's strange. It is something strange because, for example, people coming from the 50s, 60s, even myself from the 70s, we're still inclined to World War II or Cold War subjects.
Mm.
The generation of today, they like us. They are still seeing things that historical things that, let's say, unfortunately, war there is a war going on. So we are all aware that we're seeing multiple things, but seems they are not inclined to build those models. They go into the fantasy realm or else try to be more futuristic. Then again, then I see from my kids, if they're inclined to a particular video games, they sometimes incline themselves to see. I remember some years ago. It was our model exhibition in Malta, and I saw this grandfather with a young guy, young kid, maybe 12, 14-year old, and he was looking at all the tanks in exhibit and was really picking up each tank one by one. This is Panzer 1, this is Panzer 2, and going through and King Dagger. I said, oh, how come? And I went to speak to them. I said, oh, you're a model maker? No, I play World of Tanks.
Mm.
So, so that's another thing. So in a way, it's quite complex to say why generations so are inclined to particular subjects and not and maybe what sometimes I miss and why historical stuff are not really getting fancied by the younger generation. That's quite a question nowadays.
I mean, culturally, we were raised on, comedies like Hello Hello and movies like Battle of the Bulge and stuff like that. So, and with parents or grandparents as well that were involved in World War II. So we grew up in a culture that was, and I've said this last episode, so apologies to anyone who finds me repeating myself, that we grew up kind of saturated in World War II and culturally. But they've grown up with Avengers and Star Wars and sci-fi. Oh well, we had Star Wars obviously, but sci-fi and fantasy more so culturally, just because that was the fashion in movies and TV. But like you say, I was one of the people when World of Tanks came out. I hated it because of the things the fantasy things it did to tanks as you go up the levels and so on. But it has had an effect that kids. My son played World of Tanks. He plays War Thunder now. It has had an effect that kids have got into that stuff and they know what it is. So, if anything, I think it's paid more of an influence on them than modelling certainly has in terms of historical interest.
It's true. It's true. I totally agree with that. Um, what maybe, and sometimes I nitpick on us modelers. I think sometimes we are too nerds. Maybe that's maybe the proper word we can put it. We like details. We like to be realistic as much as possible. We are sometimes, how can I say? I think crazy about the proper FS color or real color and these things, and could be we are putting off the new generation. They are not that strict as we used to be in model making, so we need to allow their creativity to come in and accept what they want to say to us. I think we need to accept that. Okay, well, we can discuss that if you want to build a realistic model, it needs to go into a particular direction. But then again, if it's their will to do something like that, I'm not against it, honestly. I'm not against it. I used to be, honestly.
Mm.
I think we go through that, but I'm matured enough that today I accept people to come up with any kind of ideas, honestly. As long as it's pure model making and they are showing their skills, I think we should allow. We should allow more.
I used to be a rivet counter. As you know, I'd get right down to where the welds are placed around a nut on the idler of a Churchill and so on, and which mark of Churchill produced when, and all that. I used to be really into that stuff, and I still am. I still like to find those details because you find the details, you can paint the details, right?
It's
Part
true.
of the fun. But at the same time, I come to think that we obsess too much about the details and we spend more time worrying about the exact size and position of the driver's hatch on a Tiger 1 than we do about what a Tiger 1 did and what happened to it. That it's too much about the engineering and not enough about the history in a lot of ways.
That's true. That's true. On this ideas, reenactment taught me a lot. One thing is, for example, uniforms. Even in our units, for example, you don't find one uniform identical to the other.
Yeah.
Even color, the batches of color and cloth.
Mm.
So we don't go to war. We try to take care of them because they cost us a lot of money. So we are quite restricted to be. But you still notice even we ordered this batch this month, and in a year's time another batch even from the same tailor. You get different colors, for example. So I think we're sometimes too strict. Too strict. We need to allow more to be more creative and think out of the box.
Mm. Do you think modelling has much of an impact outside modelling circles? How likely are non-modelers to learn something from our models?
This is quite a good question. I think it has impact. It always has impact. As I said earlier, models are a visual communication tool. So people are looking at the models. So they can. there are different identity of viewers, how they look at things. So even someone who is not a modeler, so they can pick ideas, they can pick detail, and you can even teach. I think it is. I'm going to do an academic thing, so I went through my research at work.
I mean,
And
this is your thesis, right?
it was my thesis in a way. It was my thesis that I said that it was about dioramas being a didactic tool, and if it's still relevant today, yes, it is. It is. And from my research, I came up with quite a concept. There is an academic that view visitors that come into a museum into different identities. You tell me what I'm coming up with. And there are no one person is the same. And even that same person can change his perspective, how he's looking at things. And there's another thing. Models, from what I managed to find from my research, models have one particular thing that we overlook. Models speak to different ages, to different people. There's no language barrier. There's no particular language barrier. There's no age barrier. So yes, it is. It is an educational tool. So in a way, we have to be aware what we're doing and what we are subjecting in our models. Maybe hard. Maybe someone who's hearing this, some people, some others say, "Oh, what we're up to? What?" So we're not enjoying models, or else we have to be aware what other people are saying about our models. I don't think that's the idea. I think it's more what I'm saying with my model. We have to be aware what I'm saying with my model, and no model is the same. We can all build the same model. That's a good exercise. I think we can build the same model with the same scheme, and none of them will be the same.
It's something I used to think about a lot at art college because I always wanted to make art that communicated. And all art does anyway, whether you want it to or not. But I was quite interested in the idea that how well it communicated, that it was up to me to do it in such a way that the viewer understood what I was trying to say. And I think it's the same with models, that if you want someone to understand what you're saying with your model, it's up to you to build it in such a way that it's understandable. Which doesn't mean that you have to want someone to understand it. You can just, if you want to just build it for yourself and show it and have people look at it and go, that's a nice model, or people that know, all those tracks are the perfect tracks for that period on that date and what have you, that's fine. But if you do want to say something with models, it is your responsibility to think about how you say it.
Totally agree, Chris. Totally agree with this. And maybe something it's only for dioramas to be storytellers. I I tend not to agree with that. I think even a single model can say a lot. That's something I learned from museum practice. We used to be traditionally a museum used to be a collection of artifacts and just building up a collection. Nowadays, there's a different concept how we look into artifacts. Each artifact tells a story. It has to tell a story. Each artifact has a story. So I think it's the same thing about a model. So as I said, it can be a technical one. It can be, as I have in our national collection, for example, dockyard models, and then or models that we have, for example, 17th century models that were built for the nautical school. So still, it has a story to tell. Even the detail they put into, or the effort the model maker went into. So I think even nowadays, um, I remember some years ago we used to speak even styles about models. We used to say that's the Spanish school. This is the Italian school. This model I used to remember Nordic, Belgian, and any kind of schools coming up. And yes, I feel it was a school of thought. It was a school of thought. So in a way, it used to reflect. Today, it has become worldwide, almost united. You almost, it happens even in contest. I'm a head judge, and I might come up with this big issue that happened, especially last year, for example, and there was a quite an argument. But it's true that we have quite an identity nowadays that all models almost look the same. We're gonna blame that.
We're we're in danger of straying into another episode
Yes,
I've got
yes,
planned.
yes, yes.
That
I'm not going to
basically,
that. I'm not going to
I
that.
mean, modelling has homogenized the style. That it, yeah. I remember the first time I went to Shizuoka a few years ago now. You could still see the Japanese style, the Masahiro Doi style, the sort of no modulation and like airbrush dust and stuff like this, but a lot of precision and a lot of careful color separation and everything. But now when I go, I'm not sure whether, I think it's because Mig has been spending a lot of time in Japan as well in magazines and things. But all the models there look like the models here now. And that's kind of sad in a way
It's true. It's true.
that they all look the same.
Yeah, you get inspired, I guess. I guess you get it's easy. This is like traditional art as well. When new ideas come up, everyone starts following them. And honestly, now with social media and the internet, the world became quite a small pond in a way, and quite skills have become everyone is picking up, and everyone can even if a new style comes up, it starts flowing and followers going through, and people start, I'd say, copying. It is copying in a way, and then following up, and that's why many things become very 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 united in a way. For example, SMC is an international show nowadays, but sometimes you watch a selection and say you can spot this is a Japanese modeler or this is a Nordic modeler, and it is a good thing, though, in a way. I'm not against it, but it's a way how it evolved. It's evolved, and it is evolving very 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 fast. I re-
Well, historically, to pull us back on subject, um, historically it always happened anyway. I mean, a big thing here in the UK in the 18th century was Japanisme, with the goods being bought from the newly reopened Japan, where the ports have been forced open, were coming over wrapped in old ukiyo sheets and things. Artists would unwrap them like Van Gogh and stuff and look at them and go, wow, that's amazing. I want to paint like that. So they do it. But now with the internet, instead of that taking a decade to happen, it takes a week. That something just goes whoop around the world as fast as you can see it.
I used to remember you used to wait for a magazine or some big exhibition and someone come up with a new idea, and then you spend the whole year trying to mimic what this
Yeah.
guy tried to do or try to understand that. So it changed, and I feel it's a good thing in a way. So it's part of thing. What I wish to maybe people push in is a little bit more of research and keep things that are very, how can I say, not play around with history, because sometimes we need to be quiet, keep in line what it should have been, especially model wise, but then allow that bit of art coming in. For example, I love myself, even when I go abroad, to go to see military art. I love it. I love it myself. I get a lot of inspiration out of that. And I don't only see, for example, Neville, and I follow a lot, for example, modern artists that keep realistic, doing this kind. Keith Rocco, Don Troiani. Maybe these two gentlemen are two one of a kinds, I think, and still they are very. They have artistic license, but they are quite in line with historical subjects. For example, uniforms are quite even the posture of the persons and the elements they go into. So I think we need to look into these ideas and not forget that that can be realistic and still creative as well.
Do you think modelling is inherently linked to history? Do you think that modelling and history are something that has to be kept together, or do you think history is an optional part of modelling?
I leave it the choice of the modeler, honestly. It has, market wise, it has. How many tiger tanks there are? How many brands come up with tiger tanks, for example? So I think there is a historical fact that we still come up with that there's still a connection. There's still a connection. But on the other hand, it's up to the modeler in a way. And I think that is his freedom where he needs to go to more than anything else. It depends what he's inclined to in a way and what's his perspective. There is always this argument how realistic is a model and how much I want to be so historical accurate. Let's keep it.
But that brings me on to my next question. Actually, you're the head ordnance judge at Scale Model Challenge, and you've been judging yourself there with dioramas and armor for a long time. We've judged together in the past there. Do you think historical accuracy is a valid criteria in judging scale models?
It is. I cannot say it is not. It is, but it's a hard question. So I cannot penalize. You know how I think about model making, and that this is quite when I do my instructions to the judges. I always keep up with this motto: look at the good things of a model, than seeing the negative. There's no perfect model. There's no perfect model. There's no real, the pure historical accurate model. So first, look what the modeler wanted to convey. I think that's the first thing I have to see. Obviously, if there is something that is so inaccurate in history, that's up to the judges to consult between them and see if this is. And I think that's what makes, for example, the color of the medal. That can benefit what was the color of the medal in a way. But it depends. What is the story and what he wanted to say with this particular? Actually, it can be an inaccuracy. Who is the most accurate model maker? I don't see anyone can be.
Well, it's Mirko, and that's about it, really.
So, mind you, I always leave the judges free. So in these decisions, I don't. But and there is an element in the criteria that historical accuracy is one of the. But when in doubt of something, this is something I learned from Champagne. leave it to the benefit of the model maker. When in doubt, and if it's not so clear that this inaccuracy, what, why you penalize for something that it's very very minute, not something, let's say, that changed or rewrite history with this concept. Something I want to say as well, being a head judge, and this thanks to Robert and Martin, we like to team up the best model makers that we can work with, and I think that's something people need to understand when going into competitions. I know it's another hot topic and always dealt with, and there's always arguments about that. But the way we always try to work it out is to team up three different minds in each section. We always select master modelers. That's something we like to push, and you try to combine different abilities, different ideas. So from that concept, I think so far it always worked fine. I think it was one of I can boast about it, our successes in a way. And we here, I cannot say there is less rent. Let's say less rent about the award, what's been awarded. Because you can't make everyone happy. That's something. But we try, and so far I think with this selection, when you have different people and different concepts and different ideas, even different historical backgrounds, and you learn. I think you have been judging with us, Chris. I think when you start discussing with such teams, it's a learning process,
Yeah,
even for myself.
I always learn something. Yeah.
I enjoy teaming up and hearing you, even when arguments coming up.
I learn from the models too, not just from the other judges, but from the models. I learn a lot.
Yes, that's true. That's true. That's true.
I think last year there was a really big controversy over the judging, and I don't want to get into that. I'm just bringing it up because that's more or less the only time I can remember a big fuss like that over the judging at SMC, certainly on ordnance anyway. And I think that says a lot about the judging and about the team and about yours and Martin's organisation, because other competitions have this kind of furore every year. And the fact it was so unusual at SMC is a really good sign.
It happens. It happens because, as we said, there are different interpretations, and we can come up with the story. It's been on the net as well, so it came up with this idea because um, there was like a homogeneity of a certain style all over the AFV section, which in fact I cannot say it wasn't. It's true. It's true. When you go through, how you look at all the master section, especially it was because that was it, and the master section. It was true that was quite a very similar concept of style, but when you start looking one by one, then you notice differences. Then you notice that there are people, could be minute, these minor things. It is different than, let's say, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Yes, it was true. You had that, what we used to call the wow factor. That was that particular model that come up with boom, and it used to be standing out from the others. That's true. That's true. But nowadays it changed. It changed. And I think it's for the good because so many modelers today have reached the utmost of their skill that every year the benchmark is very, very, very hard to see something that stands out from the other. On the other hand, and here maybe I can pinpoint something. On the other hand, on the Aramas, I can point out a different concept. On the Aramas, we're seeing a little bit of a different transition going through. On the Aramas, we're seeing a lot of the same, lack of stories, and I feel that some that enter into that section have this philosophy. I think they think it's I'm putting the model and surround it with a. Let's say I put it more simpler. I like this tank, and I surround it with an ambience. So
Well, I was joking about this with a friend of mine, and basically the dioramas seems to have solidified around tank building figures, where you have a
yes,
building in the background, a tank in front of it, and a couple figures on the ground, and that
mind
it's
you,
very
mind you.
formulaic. Yeah,
Yes, yes. Mind you, it might be, and because there are certain rules in other competitions that dictate this. So
I
I
think
hate, I
actually
hate
it's
this,
because
I
of the
hate these ideas.
I think it's because of the popularity of a few modelers, and I don't want to say who because they might feel like I'm accusing them, and I'm not. It's just they've done it and they've done it very well, and others have said, "Oh, I fancy doing that as well." But they haven't necessarily picked up on everything that was in the original, if you see what I mean.
That's
I am
true.
going to say one, actually. I'm going to say Roger Herkman's. But there's always something more going on in his. There's all the figures,
Exactly.
the way they're interrelating with each other. It's the story.
There, there is a body language. There is a connection.
Yeah, they aren't necessarily picking that up. They're seeing the figures, the vehicle, the building, and they're copying that, but they're not copying everything. They're missing the story.
Most probably, and this is another topic, I think. A lot that go into dioramas, they think buying a stock figure is enough. But they don't realize figures sometimes are a tool that tell a story. So you need to convert figures to tell your story. You need to restyle a little bit. Small conversions. They don't really need to be to create a body language between the connections. So just a tank officer inside a cupola, standing there staring. But then, if you put the binoculars in his eyes, it's different. I think it's already telling something, and this is quite a simple thing. And I think this is people going into dioramas they're not seeing. And they go into the skills of doing the best trees, best houses, best tanks, best groundwork, but there's no connection. There's no connection.
I think a good example from last year's SMC, which also gets us back to stories to history, was Peter Usher's. It might have been from the year before, actually, Divine Intervention, and he had a Sherman next to a building, but the Sherman and the building weren't the story. The story was between the tank commander and the nun who climbed up the tank to point out Germans to him, and it was just the look between them, or him looking down her finger to where she was pointing. That's where the story was. And also that comes from history. It comes from a story he found that may be apocryphal or something from a historical source. And by bringing that into his diorama, that's how he created the story. So history can really help people find the story
That's
as
true.
well.
So that diorama was quite a learning curve in a way because it revealed something. Let's go into the basic things. So it had the usual pointing figure.
Yeah, but not the usual because she wasn't German.
That's true. Those that ring the bell, we used to call them. So in a way, he came up with the concept that we have seen it, not something new. It's the usual pointing commander. So, but what? He was wise enough. Peter was quite wise. He came up with the story. And the first thing, once you see it, you say, well, what's the nun doing there? So you go into in depth, and it was quite a revelation. More than it was a direct storyline. You needed someone needs a little bit of to explain you the real story, but it makes you intrigued. Why? Why? What are they making? What's the story behind it? The scene. So in a way, when you start thinking, so let's go into the historical fact. It is quite a fantasy thing, the story. It is a historical subject, but it has a lot of fantasy in it. If we explain it a little bit better, this diorama, it was like a ghost. So the storyline was, it is narrated by this commander. They saw this nun and told them where the Germans are and where the artillery are. And originally, it seems it was like a ghost. So it was real or not, or it was their.
I think
So
afterwards someone said there's no nunnery anywhere near here, or there's no nun, that nun doesn't exist or something, wasn't it?
exactly. So it was so there was something behind it. So in a way, it is thinking out of the box, and it's quite a fantasy subject in a way, but still it's historical. So why not? Why not people think about such ideas? And does it need to be a real source in a way, but connect with the historical subject. It's like a historical movie. So we see a lot of movies, even the recent Napoleon.
Oh gosh, that's got nothing to do with history. That's the only
Very
film
bizarre.
I've watched and afterwards felt like I knew less about the subject than I did before.
I was a crew because I work on into movies as well. so I I knew what was coming up before everyone. But still, it's the director's vision in a way. So all right, so in a way, model making can be something similar, Chris. Why not? Why not in a way? Maybe we still rise or we start looking at things and like saying, oh, what's is up to this guy in a way. Uh,
Well, I think also there's an idea among model makers that history is an immutable fact. That if they've read a history, that's the truth of it, and if you deviate from that, it's not truthful. But history is kind of our best interpretation of things that happened in the past. It's not actually 100% accurate, is it?
that's true. That's true. When you consult sources, as I said before, even history books, many historians are biased. So that is it's human nature. We cannot blame that. And even sources, original sources, and sometimes you have really to see in between the lines what's in it. Even pictures. Sometimes we study original photos. Is it true they are accurate or not? Were they staged? Were they? It was a reason if they were staged. So it is a hard topic to be for me. Those that say I try to be as realistic as possible. I think it is a tough bone to bite in a way. You cannot really be that realistic as much as possible. On the other way, being creative. I remember, Chris, for example, I was amazed about your diorama last year. I loved it. I loved
Thank
it.
you.
I really loved it. you build up all those racks up to them and conveyed all the figures coming up, and then the last figure with the Ukrainian with soldier with the white dove in his hand. So that was a very good message, for example, very good message for what's and maybe some see it as propaganda or political inclined. I don't see it like that. That was really a message of peace in a way.
Well, politics in modelling is another subject that's a favourite of mine. It was a political model, but I also think that people that say there is no politics in modelling, or there shouldn't be politics in modelling, are naive. I think that any creative endeavour is political in the same way that everything we do is political. So
There is politics in modeling, for sure. There is politics, not just political from a historical point of view. I think even politics about styles and about fashions and about what I like and what I despise in a way.
yeah,
Because
oh yeah, the great weathering debate is the most political thing ever.
exactly. I'm not going through. Let's not go into that subject.
Please no.
But it is a factor to consider. It is a factor to consider, and it is still part of our remit in a way. And it's the modern world. Everyone has his own way.
Is there anything I should have asked you that I haven't?
That's a hard question.
Well, I've got an even harder one for you if you like. I'm going to ask this to everyone. I asked it to John Rosengrant at the end of the last episode. I'm going to be asking everyone from now on. Why do you think we make models? What is it about the hobby that keeps us wanting to make these little miniature things?
If I speak for myself, I think apart it's a passion. I think we are, in a way, in control. I feel you're in control of what you're doing. So you're building something that is in the back of your mind, or it's something you enjoy, or you something you fancy, or you something you want to say or do. So you're really in control what you're doing there, and there's another thing. It's something minute, small. I've been involved into museum dioramas that is one-to-one scale, or into film props as well, that are one-to-one scale. I don't feel the same thing.
And there's that famous Peter Jackson's Weta
Exactly,
studio work for
exactly.
the museum in New Zealand as well. They were sort of, what, 3-1
No,
scale? It
they
was
made they
huge,
made
wasn't it? So,
something the Gallipoli experience. They made something gigantic in front instead of minute. But that's a really good
yeah.
concept. That's I was coming to that. It's the scale factor. Scale is something very important. Is something very important because when it's small, I think it depends. It depends the size. If you're going too minute, too small, it's a little bit destructive. So you have, let's say, a battlefield in 1,000. You're not seeing the people inside it. You're not seeing, you see, but you're seeing the overall picture. But when you're building up the scale, and and especially because, in fact, I studied it as well. What Peter Jackson did, this thing about the Weta made gigantic. They wanted to evoke the story. So they made it something more impressive. You're seeing something gigantic, and like you're more want to explore more. You're like it's different concept. You're not into control of things. You're minute to a story. I think when we're building up, let's say I enjoy 135th, 132 scale. That's my scale I prefer. I think I feel I have control. I'm seeing them in my hands. I like I'm building them, and but still I'm seeing their facial expression, and like I'm Gulliver. in Lilliput, in a way.
Very much, yeah.
But when you're seeing something bigger, I experienced myself going into a film studio. Lately in Malta, they were shooting Gladiator. And when I entered the film set and seeing, for example, I felt I'm in Rome. I felt the extras running around me like I'm the odd person out instead of the people and the actors dressed up. So I felt really I'm into Rome. I went into the subject, and I think that's something I see in modeling when, especially when I'm building things. Even honestly, I think building especially tanks sometimes it's a bit of a horrific experience going into those tracks and those minute things building up. So some enjoy it. I don't. Honestly, I don't. I, I, I want to get into the finish, and but still, you're building up that experience. I think it is an experience. It is an experience, and it is feeling part of history. And we go back to living history in a way, in your hands.
I think with danger of straying off philosophy into psychology, but I think control is a big part of it. I think particularly if we have lives where we're working for other people and we're constantly at demands of other people, to have something that you're completely in control of is very relaxing. It takes away the sort of anxieties of it. But at the same time, when it's a creative thing like that, you have total control, because you're not just telling the story how you want, you're creating the story and everything. So that's very enjoyable, to have something that starts from nothing and ends, maybe a kit, and ends in something you totally created. I think that's very satisfying.
That's true. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that.
I think with the monumental, sorry, not the monumental, with the Peter Jackson Gallipoli thing, I wonder whether that's part historiography as well, because the way when the centenary came around and the way Peter Jackson sort of reacted with that, with his World War One films and so on, there's a kind of a tendency in our societies to memorialize and monumentalize World War One, and I wonder whether that's part of it. That it's great big monumental
So
scale.
true.
It's like a worship or a
It
homage
was
of
so
that
true
history.
because you can go into there's a good YouTube channel and that explains really what they went into the story. The idea is because New Zealand, although they entered World War One, they still have they went out of their way in a way. They went to Western Front and other places, or Gallipoli, which is quite a strange, exotic place for them. And what is monumental for them is because it seems that everyone inside New Zealand has a connection with World War One. They have someone that there's some kind of connection. So in a way, there was a feeling into that exhibition, and a strange factor was people don't really aware about this. They made a war experience inside an art museum that was into Tapaka. It's an art museum originally.
That's very important as well. The sort of the setting, the venue.
So if you go how they planned out the story about apart these gigantic statues they created, they went into miniatures, videos and anything. So they made a whole concept of how practically your mind plays when seeing these things. And each they selected these few artifacts or stories and then recreated uh, their 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 idea. But they ended up with quite a nice thing like a connection. They ended up with this figure of an Anzac in the Western Front, all drenched with mud. And they asked the visitors to take a poppy and write something and throw this poppy near this. It was paper poppy, and write out. And they made a case study from what they came up with. And strangely enough, a lot of from the younger generation wrote really and what they experienced and when they saw this exhibition. So this is something we need to be aware when we do models in a way, and other people are experiencing something what we are showing, not just. It could be artistic, it could be evocative, it could be revealing something, and so we need to look into this philosophy thing behind what we're doing.
I think you don't have to think about what you model, but it can really enrich your modeling if you do think about it.
That's true. That's true. Quite a different matter. I think quite a different matter.
I do I do think a lot about why we do it, and it's a strange thing.
Talking to my club mates in IPMS Malta. By the way, I'm IPMS, so maybe no, I'm not. I'm not that kind of man. I'm very more open-minded, like the traditional strict or lifting things to see the underside. um, I see different concepts how members in my club look at models. There are those that are a stress relief. They are into stressful jobs or went into problems, life problems. So yes, modeling can be quite a good tool. Try to relieve anxiety. Even myself, I have a problem with anxiety myself. I cannot, and I find model making that helps me a lot, as long as it comes good. Because sometimes I think the
Some kits increase your anxiety.
frustrated as well. I saw things flying so in my studio, so I cannot blame that. So yes, and there are many. So it is quite a theoretical thing. What is model making for everyone? So, and I feel it changes as well. There's no one strict way. Might be this week I'm feeling I need to stress out. In fact, recently I did it myself. I was building dinosaurs. Believe it or not, I was painting dinosaurs. Just I want to do a habitat diorama. I felt I am enjoying doing this instead of the usual um, strict subjects or something like that. So I think it's up to everyone's choice. So you change. It is an evolution.
And it's a great hobby for that. You can get so many different things out of it. Okay, I think we're pretty much at the end. So before we go, though, we had some really sad news yesterday, and I wondered if you wanted to say a few words about that.
Unfortunately, yes, quite a tough thing. Yesterday, one of our founder members in our club and passed away, Lewis Carabot. He was not just a master modeler. For us, he was quite an all-rounder. But apart that, speaking for myself and even for my brothers in arms in the club, he was not just a friend, he was our mentor, our father, our kids' grandfather. So he was quite one of a kind. We lost a treasure in a way, one of our pillars in our club. But unfortunately, that's life. What's good about it? He really left a legacy. And I think even his model making and some of other models are in our national collection and the Aviation Museum, so people can still enjoy his work and remember him. And for sure, he will be part of the Maltese Society of Model Makers.
I only knew Lou a little, but he seemed to be someone who always really understood the joy of model making and was really good at spreading that to other people.
He really enjoyed model making in a way. He started, for example, with aircraft, then passing to figures, then passing to building ship dioramas, exclusive ship dioramas. And lately, into his 70s, he was doing cars. For example, recently, he just had built the Airfix Bentley, a horrible model for this age, but he managed to just reconstruct it. And he used to really, he was passionate, very passionate about model making. And one thing, he was a real master, a very real master, but he passed on his skills even to a younger generation, even to novice. That's something to be really honored about him, and something we should all of us learn about this thing. I think something really to pass on.
I'm going to put a selection of Lou's work in the show notes for this episode as well. I really do want people to have a look at these beautiful dioramas.
Thank you about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan.
A tribute to our dear Lou. We call him Nannu, Grandpa in Maltese.
I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I enjoyed talking to Ivan, and I hope we can get him back soon to tackle another subject. I'd like to read you a message now from our patron supporter Paul, who references our episode about art. Paul writes, "I like the idea of shamelessly digging into the more philosophical aspects of the hobby." That's what we're here for, Paul. Case in point, at what point does the idea of the hobby become counterproductive? When models take a step back and become extras in a piece of art, are we still within the hobby as commonly understood? I think that's a really interesting question, Paul. Certainly I can think of modellers who make models that become art, such as Jean-Bernard André, and you could say that he's making models that have a bit more to them and therefore become art. But at the same time, I think about when I went to see the Jake and Dinos Chapman exhibition many years ago in Liverpool, when they were touring with their big diorama Hell, which was made up of various vitrines filled with scenes that used a lot of World War II miniatures to do a depiction of, their idea of a depiction of hell. And there I got the feeling that the miniatures were used almost ironically, but certainly as just another object to make art, rather than a model that became art. So somewhere between, I think there is an inflection point where perhaps it tips over, but I do wonder whether that inflection point is up to the individual person and their motivation, whether it's something we can define or whether it's something that kind of you have to decide for yourself. It's a really tricky one, a really interesting question, and certainly I think there is a point where it happens, and I wonder what our listeners think. So if you have any thoughts on that, please do write in. Thanks for listening to this week's show. I really enjoyed making this one, and I really enjoy the comments and feedback we get from you, the listeners. So if you do have anything you'd like to say, please do contact us via the modelphilosopher.com page, where you can also find a transcript of this show, which is illustrated with some of the images of work we talk about, including Ivan's work and some work by the late, great Lou Carabot. Also, you can find there some contact details at the bottom. You can get hold of us, or you can just go to info@insidethearmour.com and drop me a message. Or now you can go to the Model Philosopher page on Facebook and leave us a message there, or put a comment on the show release. Thanks for listening. We really do appreciate it. Goodbye.